Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Yael Schonbrun, who's here to share with us her new book, Work, Parent, Thrive, 12 Science-Backed Strategies to Ditch Guilt, Manage Overwhelm, and Grow Connection when everything feels like too much. So Yael is a clinical psychologist, assistant professor at Brown University, co-host of Psychologists Off the Clock, a podcast about the science and practice of living well, and mother of 3. Her academic research explores the interaction between relationship problems and mental health conditions. She has authored chapters in several books and written dozens of scientific articles. In her private practice, writings, and podcastings, Yael uses experience-based science to help individuals and couples learn to manage work, parenting, and marriage in a more effective and fulfilling ways. She draws upon treatments that integrate ancient Eastern philosophies with scientifically backed practices. Yael's writing on work, parenting, and relationships have appeared in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Greater Good Science Center, Behavioral Scientist, Psychology Today, and many other media outlets. So welcome to the show, Yael.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor.
What a joy it is to have you here and to talk about this new book. I was very impressed with this book. There's so much great information in this. What inspired you to write this?
Oh, well, first, thank you so much. That's wonderful for any author to hear, and I just really appreciate that feedback. This book was inspired by my own experience as a working parent. So I was on the tried and true path to academia and actually was in the middle of my postdoc when I first had a kid. And I had always thought that I was really a good planner and had a lot of resources and that I could make this work and had every expectation that it would work. And so when I became a parent, as many parents do, and realized it's much, much harder to find the balance and to make all the things that feel important happen, it kind of took me by surprise. And I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I study relationships in my academic work. And then I also specialize in treating relationships in the clinical room. And so I had really thought that with my training and knowing how to be flexible and navigate complicated social situations that I could figure this out. And so when I started struggling and crying every day on my way to work and feeling miserable when I was at work and apart from my baby and feeling really anxious when I was at home with my child that I wasn't getting more productive work done, I started trying to read everything I could get my hands on in the popular literature about working parenthood. And what I found there was actually pretty disheartening because a lot of the literature talks about the issues at the systemic level and how, we really can't make much movement until there are advances in social policy and workplace flexibility and marital equality. And, I actually had a lot of privilege in most of those areas. And I was still feeling like it wasn't working. And so I started thinking that maybe there's something that's getting missed in what's getting talked about in the popular literature. And so I started to do what many academics do and turn to the science. And what I found there was a lot of different things, including this concept called work-family enrichment. And so as I dived into this idea that the relationship between our roles, and remember, I'm a relationship researcher, so I started realizing, there's this really complicated relationship that exists between the major roles that we inhabit in our lives. And it's more than just conflict, but conflict is also a part of it. And I started thinking about the way that I treat couples in the therapy room, that even when there's conflict, there's often a shift that can be made if we can see the differences between partners as complementary instead of adversarial. And doing that mindset shift actually can help couples get to a much happier, healthier, more fulfilling place, even though they still don't see eye to eye. And so this idea of work-family enrichment started taking root, and I started doing interviews with working parents, kind of exploring the ways that our various roles can help each other out. And that landed me in writing this book.
Well, thank you. There's so much there I want to unpack. You actually just start off your book with the problem of working parenthood. And I think that's something a lot of people are looking at going, gosh, I need to make changes here. How do I go about doing that?
Yeah. And, I think part of the problem is how we understand what's wrong. Like, it is uncomfortable to be pulled in different directions and to feel guilty when you're not attending to your kids because you're working, and to feel guilty that you're leaving the office early to get your kids when your childless colleagues are staying late. And so we think, you know, we're programmed to try to move away from discomfort. That is our evolutionary wiring to increase our chances for survival and reproduction. But understanding that discomfort doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong. And in fact, discomfort can be a place where we grow and learn more about ourselves and figure out what's important and what's not. And to see that as an opportunity to figure out, what does need to change and what needs to be managed in new and different ways, and what just needs to be tolerated more skillfully. So I think that is the mindset shift that I'm hoping to help people learn a bit more about and get more comfortable with that. And I guess it kind of goes back to this other root problem, which is, Freud said, love and work are the cornerstones of our humanness. And I think there's just something so fundamentally human about having this conflict between roles, because of course we want to be all into the things that are the most important to us. Of course we want to feel successful. Of course we don't want to miss out on important moments. But, there's only 24 hours in the day and we have to sleep for some of them. And people who have rich, meaningful lives that have opportunities to engage deeply in loving relationships and where they get to do meaningful work outside of the home, inherently, there's going to be tension between where you want to spend your time. And that's not a problem. That's actually a gift. And again, that sort of gets to this mindset shift of seeing that as an opportunity to really embrace that you have a full, rich life, but that it comes with some discomfort in feeling like you want to embrace all of it.
It's not like we will have a life without challenge or adversity.
Nope. If you're alive, you're certain to encounter some discomfort and challenge and adversity along the way. And again, that's not a problem. That's an opportunity.
A very good way to look at it. Well, how about labeling? Does that happen a lot where we really need to look at the labels?
Yeah, so I practice a treatment called acceptance and commitment therapy, which is an evidence-based treatment that has a lot to do with the way that we relate to language. And one of the ideas that's really critical in this kind of treatment is trying to create a little bit more flexibility around the labels that we use, particularly when labels that we apply interfere with our functioning. So for example, in the clinical room, if I have somebody who comes in and tells me, I'm the worst parent, right? Because I didn't do this for my child. I had to work, and so I missed their first school play. I'm the worst parent. And when we attach to those kind of labels, it makes us feel bad. And when we feel bad, we're not very present and we kind of shame ourselves and we don't feel very effective in any of our roles. And we don't enjoy our moments with our kids or feel satisfaction when we get our work done. And so the hope in acceptance and commitment therapy is to help people unhook, or the term that we use is diffuse. So we unhook or diffuse from the labels that are kind of causing us to be ineffective in our lives, and instead turn towards the kind of language that feels more helpful. Like, I'm a busy person who has a very rich, full life is a much kinder way to talk to ourselves. And the function of that, the function of switching the kinds of language that we use isn't to sort of let ourselves off the hook. It's so that we can be more effective in all the areas that feel critically important to us.
Well, I think the mindset's just such a powerful thing. And I know you talk about that quite a bit in your book.
Yeah, at the end of the day, my hope is that, there's a lot of specific strategies that I talk about in the book that are all science-backed, but my overarching hope is that people who read the book come out with a mindset shift. And the shift is from a mindset that really focuses on work-family conflict to a mindset of work-family enrichment.
What a great place that would be.
Yeah.
I just found it so fascinating that we can actually look at this parenting in such a different way. And I feel that a lot of times people get caught in that trap of that guilt where they've got the labeling going on, they've got the guilt, and it just is this little hamster wheel that they can be on. So I was so impressed with how you are looking at that and going, okay, maybe these are things that we can look at differently.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and guilt is you're right. It's such an emotion that triggers this hamster wheel of like, how do I escape this? How do I do better? I feel so uncomfortable. And I talk a lot about guilt because it is such a common emotion in our modern world for anybody who has more than one demanding role, or even for somebody who has only one demanding role, because we just feel like the expectations are so high. And guilt is an interesting emotion that psychologists have studied, which has really important functions, right? It is a relationship enhancing function. And if you think about emotions as being wired in for survival and reproductive purposes, protecting our relationships, it used to be one of the most important things that we needed to do for survival. But nowadays, we're not our survival is not under imminent threat if we don't get a work assignment in on time, or if we miss our child's school athletic performance. Nothing too terrible will happen, and so that guilt, which prompts us to do these things that feel protective, life enhancing, might just not be terribly helpful. And so being able to kind of unhook from that guilt and ask ourselves, how useful is this emotion in terms of informing me about something that I haven't done well, or a relationship that I need to protect? And then how much is it interfering with me getting off this hamster wheel so that I can move forward in directions that matter to me?
I think that's so powerful. In your book, you talk about values. So, how does this relate to what we're discussing about?
Yeah, so values are one of the core processes in acceptance and commitment therapy. And values are defined as a quality of action. So it's how you want to show up moment to moment. And they're different than goals, because goals are somewhere that you can go, something that you can achieve, whereas values are more how you take the journey. So the metaphor is like if you're climbing up a mountain, your goal might be to get to the top of the mountain, but values would inform how you get there moment to moment. And they depend a lot on context. So your values might be different if you're climbing up the mountain with a friend, right? You might decide to chat or, share what's been going on with you lately, or sit in silence and just feel connected. Or if you're alone, you can look at the ground, or you can look up at the sky. And then if the weather starts changing, you might shift your values from persisting and trying to get a workout to prioritizing your safety. So values can change moment to moment depending on our circumstances, but they really reflect how we most want to show up moment to moment. And having clarity in our values can really be helpful when we're confronted with difficult choices. So, for example, do I prioritize getting this work task done, or do I prioritize putting my child to bed? Being clear on how you want to show up as a working parent moment to moment, and kind of always coming back to that question of, what's my value here? What's my guiding force? Can help you unhook from the guilt and from some of those labels, and help to connect you to a compass that feels a lot more useful. Some of the questions that we acceptance and commitment therapy therapists ask our clients in session are things like, if you were to travel forward in time 30 years and look back on this difficult phase of life, what kinds of things do you imagine feeling proud of having stood for? In the book, I talk about a difficult decision that I had to make when my father was dying. And so one of the questions that I asked myself was, what do I think my father would want me to do? How would he be most proud of me showing up in this moment? And so by unhooking from the present moment and asking ourselves those kind of curious questions about what kinds of qualities we want to embody in the difficult impasses of life, we can get more clear on how to proceed, even when there's not like an obvious right choice.
I think a lot of times people are in these positions where they have the demands from work and the demands from home, and they're trying to balance both. It's like, okay, so how do we even do that?
Yeah. And I mean, balance is an interesting question too. And even just the word, because I think, balance, as it's often used, is thought of as an outcome, right? Sort of like you achieve balance and then you're done. And I think it's much more of a process, a moment-to-moment process, which again is where values really fit in. So I do think, you know, one thing that I think is really helpful is to recognize that we're always making choices and that choices always have opportunity costs, just necessarily. Like if you're choosing to go left, you're choosing not to go right. And so you're giving up the option to go right by choosing to go left. And even if you make no choice, that has opportunity cost, right? Because you're not proactively making a decision to move in a particular direction, and you're instead more passively allowing the forces of life to make the choice for you. And so no matter what, we don't get to avoid opportunity costs, but with values in hand and clarity on how we want to show up moment to moment, we get to choose for ourselves what we want to stand for. So, for example, and maybe I'll use an example that's even more broadly relatable, but if you have a moment in your life where you've decided to really prioritize your health and you want to exercise, but you had a rough day and your alarm goes off at 6 a.m. in the morning and you're thinking to yourself, I have this value of health. And I had decided in general that I was going to work out Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and today is Monday. And what do I do here? Like, I feel really guilty. I'm feeling fat. I'm feeling ashamed of myself. Okay, here's a moment where I'm going to unhook and ask myself, what do I want to stand for in this moment? Okay, I decided that the value was trying to show up on Monday mornings with a healthy attitude and making healthy behavioral choices. Okay, now I get to ask myself the question of, given that I'm really tired, what would be the healthy choice? Would it be to give myself permission to sleep in, or would the healthy choice be to get up and go for a walk? And there's no wrong answer there, but unhooking from the guilt, unhooking from the self-criticism, unhooking from the shame that we felt about our past, and instead connecting to, here's the value, and given what's going on around me and inside of me, how can I embody this value in this moment?
I love that. Just makes it such a easier process, I think, in many ways, because we're asking these questions and getting curious about things that show up in our lives, challenges or what have you.
Totally. And I don't know if you feel this way as a podcaster. I have a podcast that I co-host as well, but I have a lot of anxiety before every single time I record. And it's always that question of, I'm really uncomfortable. I'm going to put myself out there. I might embarrass myself. I might totally stumble over my words. And then there's that opportunity to say, but what do I care about? Like, when I look back on this phase of my life, would I be proud of having not put myself out there, or would I be proud of having put myself out there, even if it meant sometimes I did or said embarrassing things? And so I think, lots of people who have public platforms like me and you encounter that too. And values are so handy.
Oh yes, I get that too. I don't think anyone doesn't really get that, because the thing is like, we all make mistakes. We all have times where we're probably not as eloquent as we are other times. And that's life, So,
That's life. Totally. There's
well,
actually a saying in acceptance and commitment therapy that I love, which is that we hurt where we care. Like, if you didn't care about not being graceful with your words, then it wouldn't feel bad. But it's the fact that you do care. It's the fact that we do care about our roles, that we put so much pressure on ourselves. And so running away from the emotion isn't going to save us, because what we really want is to do really well in the things that we care about. But that means that we're going to encounter some discomfort.
well, how about the parents that are saying, okay, well, I've got young kids and I feel really guilty about putting them in childcare or having a family member watch them and I'm having to work. Is there any benefit in having children separated from their parents while the parents are working?
That's such a great question. And it, of course, is so nuanced. But I will say, first and foremost, that I so relate to that dilemma. That was something I struggled. I have 3 children, and I struggled with that terrible guilt of putting them in paid care every single time when they were very young. Now, when they're a little older, it got easier for me. But I think that is a common experience. And again, that is something that to some extent is kind of hardwired into us. But again, it's sort of this evolutionary hangover where you not being around your kids isn't as dangerous today as it was, in pre-modern times. So that's the first thing. The second thing to remember, and this is where science, I think, really helps us manage our guilt, is that it actually is good for our kids, even very young ones, to be in the care of other caregivers. And the science on this is really interesting and pretty powerful. So from anthropological research, we know that pretty much without a doubt, humans are wired to rear children collectively. So there's this concept called alloparenting from the field of anthropology. And it's the idea that we parent in groups, that non-biological parents are traditionally a really important part of raising kids because raising humans is so taxing. And so we're not really we're not really set up as humans to do it alone. And yet here we are in our modern world having to go at it alone because that's kind of the culture that we've evolved into. And so one of the ways that I think we can rethink the need to delegate some of that childcare out if you're a working parent is that this is actually a way that we're kind of going back to our roots of collective child rearing, and getting other people involved is good for you because it frees up some of your resources so that when you come back to your kid, you'll hopefully have some energy to give to them. And also that it's really good for our kids to be with other caregivers and to form those bonds and to learn from other teachers. It's good for them to be in settings with kids their own age and little kids, especially sensitive ones, to build some resilience. And it's good for us to be connected to other caregivers who have more experience, especially for new parents, because they can teach us things like, how do you get your child to sleep? How do you get them to eat solids? How do you get them to separate even when they're anxious? And so this is something that I think really does just very naturally prompt a lot of guilt, especially in first-time parents. And again, knowing that science, that even though you feel guilty, that's not a sign that you're doing anything wrong. In fact, there's a lot of good that can come when we involve other caregivers, even in very early child care of our little ones.
In your book, you talk about boredom too. So I'd love for you to share your thoughts on boredom with children.
So boredom is this emotion that we've basically eradicated because there's screens and various forms of entertainment everywhere in the world. And I think the science is pretty clear that learning how to be bored is actually an important skill, because when we're bored, it's an opportunity to be quiet and to reflect and to get to know ourselves. So that opportunity gets missed if we're never bored, if we never allow our children to be bored, that they don't know how to kind of sit with themselves and know themselves and know their own thoughts and know their own feelings. Boredom is also a great opportunity to get creative, because what happens when we're bored is our mind naturally wanders over to content that's more personally interesting to us. And so it's often when we're bored that creative ideas arise. And so allowing your kids to whine and be bored and to notice your own guilt coming up when they express their boredom, but to pause and say, you know what, like, this is a really great opportunity for you to be creative and to know yourself, and let's practice this. In my household, I'm kind of a drill sergeant about boredom, I guess. But when I am home with my kids for a holiday or on a weekend, they know that they have enforced screen-free rest time. And during that time, they go to their rooms. There's no technology. They're allowed to draw or read, but they need to sort of have an hour to themselves where they entertain themselves. And that's just kind of one of the practices that we have. And it serves a double purpose, because they get a chance to be bored and I get a chance to step away from my parenting role, get a little bit of work done, and take a break from parenting. And then when I come back to parenting, I feel more refreshed and they feel and ready to engage with them and do something that is not boring. So practicing being bored is good for your kids. It's good for us too. I think this is something that parents can practice a lot more of. So for example, if you're waiting in line at the grocery store, instead of pulling out your phone, just be with your own thoughts. Take a minute before you get out of the car to go inside and start dinner, and just sit quietly with yourself and check in, right? It's an opportunity to know yourself and to give yourself an opportunity to reflect on your day and have a creative thought and just center yourself.
I think that's so and just impactful. It as far as being able to raise children who have this great sense of creativity. A lot comes from that boredom.
Totally. Yeah. And, it's also like boredom is a time of low stimulation. We can rest. So, especially for kids who are, in a gazillion activities and working parents who are just always busy, like embrace those moments of quiet where you don't have too much going on.
In your book, you have this quote that I really was impressed with on toughness. And I'd love to kind of dive into the topic of this. You talk about to do the right thing for the right reason, we often must persist through difficulty. Life has ups and downs, and wisdom helps you manage the bumps on the road. And I think a lot of times people just expect, like they've reached a certain career or have their children, and they should be at a place where, life is just much more smoother than what it really is.
Yeah. This is the idea of practical wisdom. And I love this quote from Albert Einstein where he says, learning is experience. Everything else is just information. So you might have gotten to your adult life and working parenthood and experienced lots of things, but wow, working parenthood will give you so many experiences that will just up your wisdom like no other combination of roles. But just backing up for a second, I mean, the idea of practical wisdom is an idea that is Aristotelian. So it's not wisdom the way that it's defined is learning to do the right thing at the right time in the right place with the right people. And in order to learn that, we need to have lots of different roles, and we need to be able to perspective take. We need to be able to read the room. And as you're pointing to, we need to be able to persist even when things are hard. We also need to know when to grit and when to quit. We need to know when it no longer makes sense to endure. And in order to know all of those things, we have to get practice. And there's no sort of finish line for building wisdom. We're always building wisdom. And so if you see that as an ongoing process, then you can see a life filled with lots of different demanding roles as an opportunity to always be growing wisdom. And goodness knows that wisdom comes in handy in every role that we have. Parenting for sure, wisdom is very useful. And in most jobs, wisdom is also very, very useful. So being able to know, and so, this idea of toughness, of sort of persisting through what's hard, I talk about sort of these two constructs. So resilience, this is the idea of bouncing back after we've had a difficult experience. And resilience, as I was just saying, that builds out of tough experiences, right? We don't build resilience unless we have adversity. And so that helps us do a mindset shift on our tough moments, because if we see that as an opportunity to build this important, human experience, a human quality, human skill of resilience, then it doesn't feel like a negative. It's actually, it doesn't feel comfortable, but it's quite useful. Grit, on the other hand, is the idea that is more of a quality that we bring to difficult things. So it's, persisting in passion and curiosity, even when things aren't so easy. And that persistence helps us to grow skill. And when we grow more skillful, then we enjoy it. But sometimes it takes a while before we get that skill. But if we're interested and care enough about whatever the thing is that we're doing, that helps us persist. And that really is a quality that is important in wisdom.
Well, then we can teach our children that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so important, I think, to do these things for ourselves. But yeah, I always kind of keep in mind that we're always modeling, like our kids learn more from what they see than what we say.
Oh my gosh, all the time it seems like, right? Well,
Yeah.
well, and I know in your book you talk about stress, and I think that that's such a big topic right now. And I'm sure that that also kind of trickles down through the family. So if a mom's real stressed or dad's real stressed, the children are feeling stressed as well. So what are some things that we can do to like buffer that?
Yeah. So this is the idea of finessing our stress. So again, we come to mindset shifts where, we may think about stressful situations as a negative, but actually, if we see them as an opportunity, it really changes how we experience this. There's really cool laboratory research on mindset shifts. So they'll bring people in and show them these brief videos where in one set of videos, they teach stress as debilitating, that if you feel stressed, it's going to be a problem. And the other half of the participants, they teach them stress as enhancing. So, being stressed out helps you focus more. It helps your memory be stronger. It helps you to seek feedback because it teaches you that there are new resources that you need to develop, skills that you need to grow. And just those brief interventions really change how people do a stressful task. So when we think about stress as enhancing, we tend to perform better. We recover more. We're more open to feedback, which helps us grow skills. And so thinking about stress from this mindset of stress as an opportunity to grow in areas that feel important to us helps us to endure stress with more grace and to come out on the other side with more skills than we started out with. It's sort of, again, I sound like a broken record, but it doesn't mean it's comfortable and doesn't mean that it isn't hard and doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a whole lot of self-compassion along the way when stressful things happen. I mean, in real life, hard things happen. Like we have financial stressors or health scares, or our child gets diagnosed with a learning disability, or our partner loses their job, or we lose a parent. Like scary, terrible things happen. And seeing the opportunity, the gifts to grow within that doesn't mean that you think it's great that stressful things happen. It just means that they are, that as the hard things are happening, that we can grow along with them and find new ways to engage in the world that have meaning and purpose for us.
Is it possible that they could subtract something that's stressing them out from their lives, and so that way they're not having more obligations?
Yeah. So I love the idea of subtracting. I'm very into less. I think people who are really busy have a tendency to only add more. And there's interesting science on this too. There's a really terrific book called Subtract by the author is Leidy Klotz, and he talks all about, he did this really cool series of studies. One of them showed that when we're stressed out, when we have high cognitive burdens, we're even less likely to take things off our plate than normal. And even under normal circumstances, human brains are default to adding more tasks, more material goods to our houses, more activities on our calendar. And so if you think about a busy person who's already disinclined to subtract, and then they have a particularly stressful day and they're even less disinclined to subtract, you end up with a very, very busy, overwhelming day. And so the antidote to that is to get more deliberate about subtracting practices. And again, this is so important for people who have multiple demanding roles. So thinking about, the things that feel stressful to you that don't have much value. Now we get back to values and finding ways to remove those, right? If you're not getting something out of an activity, even though you feel you're getting pressure, social pressure, like the moms at the PTO, their kids all do the thing, or they are all volunteering for some community event, but you don't really want to, notice that guilt and then ask yourself, is this something of value? When I look back on my life 30 years from now, am I going to be glad that I did this activity? Or am I going to feel regretful that I didn't take a break to recenter myself so that I could show up as parent and as worker in ways that felt more present and engaged because I was so burned out. And so I think, again, being more deliberate about regularly subtracting and recognizing that when we're really busy and overwhelmed, we're much less likely to do that. And so really putting it on your calendar to think about what to take off your to-do list, I think is a really important practice for busy people.
So people sometimes get in this trap where now they've subtracted things and they have time, so they've got to fill it with something else.
Well, now we get back to the value of boredom. Yeah, I think there is that impulse. I have a free hour. What should I do with it? And I mean, that really is a personal choice. If you are somebody who likes every hour filled, more power to you. I happen to be somebody who really does much better when I have downtime. And I think many people are that way, even though our world, the way that our society is structured, doesn't really encourage that. But if you know that about yourself and you've worked hard to subtract some activities from your calendar, think about what could be some quieter activities and really dedicate that hour that you freed up to some more centered, low stimulation, downtime kinds of activities, right? It doesn't have to be anything in particular, but it could be, quality time with your kids, or reflection time where you journal, or going for a walk, getting out into nature, or just sitting still and resting your body in some way that feels rejuvenating for you. So I think, if you work hard to subtract some things from your calendar and you have those open pockets of time, spend some time reflecting on your values and how you want to carry forward, how you want to show up in those less busy periods of time that you've worked hard to cultivate.
Yeah, it really gives us the opportunity to develop self-compassion and some self-care.
Yeah. Opportunity to, right, be kind to ourselves. Self-compassion is something that I talk a lot about in the book. There's the research on this has really flourished in the past few years. And just real quickly, the definition of self-compassion, it's typically defined as having three components. So one is present awareness of what's going on for you. So being able to kind of notice what the uncomfortable thoughts and feelings might be. Self-kindness. So saying the kinds of things to yourself that you would say to somebody that you really loved and cared about, because we tend to be kinder to people outside of ourselves than we are to ourselves. And then the third component is common humanity. So remembering that many people have felt probably exactly the way that you do, even if their circumstances aren't identical. So, for example, for working parents who feel overwhelmed and tired and stressed out, you have a whole community of working parents out there who really do know what it feels like. And so remembering that even if you feel alone in it, you're not alone. And finding a way to kind of connect to that either through, mental imagery or thinking about, the community that you're a part of, or actually reaching out to somebody and connecting can be really helpful. Or even connecting to yourself. And that's where the quiet time is really useful, as you're pointing out.
As far as getting into mindfulness and meditation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that can be super important and super helpful. I hesitate to recommend it for really busy people because it can feel like yet one more thing that they're going to fail at doing. So what I like to think about is that there's lots and lots of different ways to incorporate mindfulness meditation like practices in your life that don't require you to sit on a cushion for an hour. And it could simply be that before you go to bed every night, you take 3 breaths, or that you notice the feeling of the water in the shower, like that you make a practice of really paying attention to that moment and the texture of the water and the temperature of the water, or that when you're brushing your teeth, you really pay attention to the sounds of the toothbrush against your teeth. I really love a book called Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics, where the authors Dan Harris and Jeff Warren and Carly Adler have all these great recommendations. And one of them is a reality TV meditation, which I just love. So before you sit down to binge out on your favorite TV show, just sit back in the cushion and relax your body and really savor that moment of you indulging yourself and having gone through an exhausting, tiring day. Another way to work in mindfulness meditation like practices is with your kids. So, when you reunite with them after a working day, give them a hug and really savor that moment. Feel their little bodies curling into yours, smell their hair, and really just enjoy that feeling of connecting to these little people that you love. Same thing with work, enjoy the quiet of the office where your home is very loud and chaotic. Really savor the sound of the the hum of the machines, but not anybody screaming at you. So there's ways to kind of fit it in that work for you. And I will share that I have developed a very brief meditation practice where I literally just do 3 minutes a day, because that's what I feel like I have time to carve out, and I'm pretty dedicated to it. And I I use Insight Timer, and I have a gong at every minute. And the first minute is just feeling my body. The second minute, I allow myself to think about what I'm going to get done that day, because I usually do it in the morning. And the third minute, I spend on gratitude, thinking about something that I'm grateful for. And each of those kind of has its own function, but it really does give me an opportunity to slow down and have some quiet. And developing that practice has really helped me to stay connected to myself. So meditation and mindfulness has so much science behind it in terms of its utility for our well-being, for our health, for our physical health, for our relationships, for our mental health. So it is useful, but I really like to emphasize for busy people that there's so many flexible ways to work it in. It really does not have to be this traditional, hour on the cushion kind of thing.
Thank goodness for that, right?
Right.
Yeah, is this something that you share with your children as well?
The meditation practices.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to varying degrees, we have had pockets of time where we've done it together. My kids are now 5, 9, and 12, so they kind of roll their eyes a little bit at this point. But we have quiet time where we sit together, and they know that my husband and I take turns reading to them. And when I read with them, we have like a moment where I hug them, and I think they know that I'm kind of sinking into it. But I think kind of unofficially, we do a bit of that, and we talk about kind of slowing down. And it's really cute. My 5-year-old, when he's really upset, does a breathing technique that is really effective for him, that came out of, practices that we did where, when he's having big feelings, he takes 3 deep breaths and he closes his eyes. Oh, I'm just remembering the other adorable thing that he does is when we have a dessert, he eats it mindfully, and he really goes over the top with it. It is very, very cute. So we do some things, but they're more playful than serious, I would say, at this point.
Well, such a great practice to take with him through life, and I'm sure he's
Yeah.
gonna savor every dessert he ever has.
He really does.
Well, and earlier you talked about reading the room. So, what do you mean by that, and why is that important?
Yeah, so reading the room is an important component of emotional intelligence. So it's this idea of sort of knowing who your audience is. This is a funny thing with my kids too, because sometimes my 12-year-old will do a joke that nobody thinks is funny, and I'll tease them and they'll say, "Buddy, you got to read the room." And I think it is actually a really important skill to be able to know your audience. In the workplace, you're not going to interact the same way that you do in your home, nor should you. And being able to kind of pivot to recognize, what is the tenor of the room? Are we serious, or is there some levity? Can I bring some levity? Is that a safe and appropriate thing to do? To be able to perspective take is a hugely powerful tool that we can use to be effective in all of our roles. So if you know that there are certain ways of being that work better for your boss, then you'll know how to pitch a new idea more effectively. If you know that a colleague who you're sharing a project with, enjoys a certain kind of task and not another, then you'll be more wise about how you distribute the responsibilities. If you're trying to get your 2-year-old out the door, recognizing that there are certain ways that are more effective to talk to a 2-year-old and certain ways that are not. For example, they don't like to be told what to do, so give them multiple choice options so that they have a sense of agency. Then it can really help you to be most effective in achieving your objectives. And sometimes your objective is just to connect with people. So, reading the room in terms of, is there more information that I need to gather? And being curious and being compassionate towards the people around you. And, again, this is a skill that builds the more roles that we have, the more different kinds of people that we engage with, because we learn to understand that people come from a different perspective than us, and that we can kind of meet them partway there if we can learn how to engage in different ways and be open to different ways that other people have of engaging with us. So it's, emotional intelligence is different than, it's different than wisdom, and it's different than the kind of intelligence that gets us the job or gets us the good grade, but it is super important for being skillful and successful in life. And, I think that's why the books on emotional intelligence have really been so popular, because there is such a profound effect that they have on how we navigate the worlds that we live in.
Well, the good thing is you talk about how these are skills that we can develop. So if it's not something that we have a life skill that we've learned before, it's something we can learn.
Oh, totally. I mean, this is where growth mindset just comes in so handy. And growth mindset the research in this area was pioneered by Carol Dweck, who is a psychologist at Stanford. And it's this idea that, if you can boil mindsets down into two different categories, fixed mindsets believe that our skills are inborn, that we sort of come into the world and we're good at math or we're bad at math, that we're good at reading the room or we're bad at reading the room. Whereas growth mindset suggests that where we start is not necessarily where we end, and that with interest and effort and lots of practice, that we can get to a different place than where we started. So I might not be good at math, but I care enough to keep trying, to find the right teachers, to practice, to find the fun in it. Then I can get much better at math. And the same thing goes with emotional intelligence. And pretty much there are so many areas that we think are static, and they actually fit more under a growth mindset kind of mentality. For example, personality can grow. Our ability to be happy can grow, and certainly our ability to read the room can grow. And again, that growth comes from experience. And if you live in a life that is full of lots of different roles and demands, that is hard. And it's also this great opportunity to grow in so many ways if you can pivot towards thinking about that as an opportunity.
What would you like readers to take away from your book?
Well, again, my greatest hope is that people do have a mindset shift on this relationship between work and family roles, that we can begin to see it as a relationship that does have conflict, right? There is tension when you have multiple demanding roles, but that there are also really amazing opportunities that are embedded in lives that have so much demands inside of them. And that a busy, stressful life doesn't need to be void of happiness and joy and connection and fulfillment. It's a both and situation, that we can have stress and build tons of happiness, that we can feel tired, but also find ways to recharge our battery, even in a life that is full of tasks that need to get done. So to really develop like a more flexible, growth-oriented mindset around lives that are really jam-packed with demanding roles.
Yael, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
So I co-host a podcast called Psychologists Off the Clock, so they can check out the episodes there. Our mission is to share evidence-backed psychology and practices with non-academic audiences. So it's a really fun podcast we have on authors, but we also have conversations between ourselves. We're all clinical psychologists. So you can go to offtheclockpsych.com to find out more through our website, or just look up Psychologists Off the Clock wherever you get podcasts. And then you can check out work from me and my writing at my website, which is yaelschonbrun.com. That's YaelSchonbrun.com.
Well, Yael, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Marianne, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Yael. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Work, Parent, Thrive. Work, Parent, Thrive's available everywhere books are sold, and remember, support our indie bookstores. So do you have a small business or book that you think should be on the radio, and the social media algorithms have changed so much that you just can't connect with your target market? Well, you're not alone. That's why so many people are choosing to advertise on radio. KMET is part of the 25th largest U.S. radio market in Southern California, serving around 3.5 million in the station's broadcast area. The Moments with Marianne radio show is also available everywhere online after it airs on KMET. With over 800 episodes that have been downloaded in over 78 countries, we're the #1 choice for advertising books and small businesses. So contact us today at mariannepastana.com. Submit your information for consideration, and we'll point you in the direction for what it takes to advertise on KMET, AM, and FM. Well, we're going to pause here for a quick moment. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.